Hello, beloved Earth humans. I come in peace. My name is Seth Unterseer, and I've decided to somewhat reintroduce myself to the world under this new online alias in honor of the release of my new book, The Path Unveiled. And yes, the alias is a little bit playful for how serious the book is. But I feel like I have to give myself a little room for playfulness since honestly trying to act too serious or somber all the time would feel a little bit inauthentic. And playfulness is part of the human experience in the right times and places. There's room for play within enlightened reasoning. In fact, a more enlightened world would allow for new forms of creative playfulness to be safely explored and potentially flourish, which really can't flourish um, as much. Well, a lot of people operate under certain unsubstantiated assumptions about reality or others, and also, well, people often form caustic expectations towards one another, which can inhibit the safe expression of innocent playfulness in certain circumstances. But I'll try not to go overboard with my playfulness. I solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I'll aim to keep my playfulness tactful and tactical and resist the temptation to allow my playfulness to evolve into a metaphysical tackle tickle, which most people are understandably not terribly fond of. I'll try to keep it at a spoonful of sugar and not a big rock candy mountain, but it might be tough sometimes. It's a real temptation. In any case, most of the first few who are going to see this, of course, already know about the book's release, but it's a fairly serious matter, so I'm preparing this profile to allow myself to elaborate on some of its key points and to answer some of the questions that people may have over time, and to potentially talk about, anything important really, though I'm likely going to center this primarily around the book, at least for a while. I've provided a link to the book below, and in this first video, I'd like to begin by providing a few examples of some of the practical applications of the process of making aspects of the subconscious more consciously controllable in ways that benefits us, which is one of the key focuses of the book, the expansion of consciousness through the accurate observation of the subconscious mind and other forms of the unknown. That said, I kind of just want to get straight to the point, so let's dive in. We, as conscious beings, are the size of our consciousness. And what I mean by that is that the things that we choose to believe, the things that we know to be true, and the things that we think we know to be true but actually don't, are all fundamental components of what we are and directly relate to the physics equation of our motions and actions through space-time. The other primary component of what we are in that equation is our desires, or will, but I'm not going to get into that in this video. Now, the practical application of learning to gain conscious control over the subconscious that I would like to explore in this video is the consideration of consciously observing and refining our adrenaline responses. Every one of us has an adrenaline response fundamentally built into us, which is designed to alert us to and protect us from danger by increasing our heart rate and raising our blood pressure. If we never actively think about our adrenaline response and how we react to it, then it's an almost purely subconscious impulse. However, as beings which are capable of thought, we have the power to observe and consciously, or to observe and consider that impulse, and to thereby regulate, refine, and transform it in certain ways according to our will. though it does, of course, take time and practice to notice and transform any given habit which we may have. Now, go ahead and raise your hand if you've ever been startled by something out of the corner of your eye, and perhaps you've felt that the amount of energy that goes into increasing your heart rate might have been a little bit annoying because, it was just like a leaf blowing in the wind or the shadow of a bird or something. So if we learn to become more conscious of our adrenaline response when it kicks in, we can learn to refine how swiftly and accurately we consciously analyze whatever it has directed our attention to, and also to thereafter control how much we need to increase our heart rate and blood pressure to safely and healthily respond to the situation, rather than simply being subjected to whatever the instinct imposes on us. Okay, you can go ahead and put your hand down now. So first, I do want to warn you, though, it's not a good idea to suppress your adrenaline response entirely, because it is, of course, there to protect us. It may not be possible for everyone necessarily, but some people do have the power to consciously determine that they will simply remain perfectly calm no matter what if they want to, which isn't always a good state to be in. Um, for example, if someone attends a haunted house, they know that everything's going to jump at them and try to startle them, but it's not actually going to hurt them, so they might very easily suppress their adrenaline response and just go through the haunted house without any reaction. But of course, in other situations, like while we're driving, we need to be alert to what's going on around us. So it's obviously not a good idea to be too zenned out and tranquil while driving, unless perhaps you happen to be on some flat open road where you can clearly assess that there's nobody around, no possibility of anything running out in front of you, and no weird curves or anything else that you might want to maintain just a little bit of attention to handle. Now, the subconscious does a pretty good job of keeping us situationally aware and adjusting our alertness levels rather appropriately to different circumstances. But a lot of the time, being more actively mindful about such things can provide significant improvements to both our reaction time and the intelligence of our reactions. And driving is actually a rather perfect activity to consider practicing the conscious regulation of both general tension and our adrenaline responses with, since it provides a constant fluctuation of situations for us to react intelligently to, and to be mindful of the potential negative consequences of either being too calm in situations which demand attention, or of being too tense when it simply isn't necessary or beneficial. For example, a lot of people who experience chronic road rage are in that state because their adrenaline response is trying to keep them alert and safe. But they may have, you know, they may have either a subconsciously anger-oriented trigger in any high blood pressure situation, or they may simply enjoy casting impure judgments on others and being angry. But the fact of the matter is that if they ever want to grow out of that chronic frustration, they're going to have to learn to more consciously consider both how they're assessing the situations around them and how they're reacting to those assessments. Now, it may be a little easier and safer for you to focus more on the aspect of dissipating adrenaline and lowering your blood pressure once danger has passed or a situation has been determined non-threatening, before you necessarily try to force yourself to make a more rapid and accurate assessment of whatever your adrenaline response points you to than your instinct might make. Because we can also, of course, make our responses worse if we overthink them. And I don't want to accidentally encourage you to be like, for example, riding your bike and you see someone coming around the corner on their skateboard and you're like, danger, wait, let me see, I don't think he's going fast enough. Oh, he is going fast enough, and then you crash. What I want to encourage you to accomplish using that sort of situation is to be more like, danger, wait, okay, I have enough time to brake. All right, so handled it, you know, it wasn't a big deal, it was nobody's fault, it was just an unfortunate thing. I don't need to feel a bunch of extra adrenaline right now. I don't need to have any extra stress in my day from this. I recognize my adrenaline response, I dealt with it intelligently, and I'm going to consciously calm it down now. You know, I might be slightly naturally more on edge until I get home, but, you know, I don't need to be jumpy, and I can chill when I get home. You know, or something along those lines. All right. So here's the fun part. This process of regulating a subconscious tendency to make it more logically refined can be applied to all of our subconscious habits, to our emotions, and to the fundamental way that we think about just about anything. We can learn to recognize any given reaction or habit, consider whether it's reasonable and based in truth, and then choose whether we continue with that reaction, amplify it, dissipate it, or adjust it in any given way. Now, I just examined road rage, but let's expand that examination to any form of frustration or anger, which is, you know, basically the adrenaline response attached to the idea that some sort of injustice has occurred, or if someone's simply a bad person and they don't care about justice, then anger is just attached to the idea that you know, things aren't going the way they want them to as much as they'd like them to. Now, in most cases, you know, it's fairly safe to say that anger is often simply immature and non-productive, but in some cases it can be productive if we regulate it intelligently. You know, if anger truly is caused by the observance of a genuine injustice, then anger can potentially motivate us to figure out what needs to be done to rectify that injustice. You know, like with the adrenaline response, we don't want to suppress it entirely, or we might allow unjust things to happen to ourselves or others. But if we don't regulate our anger intelligently, you know, we might just fume and whine about it, perceived injustices, and, you know, waste our energy and basically accomplish nothing meaningful, or perhaps trying to convince other people to be mad with us so that we can all feel right about how mad we are. So, you know, it's just generally a good policy to seek to be mindful of why we experience certain emotions when we experience them, to consider whether or not that experience is based in truth or just in speculation, and whether or not our intended reaction to those emotions is productive or non-productive, and also healthy or unhealthy. Now, I could provide many more examples of when and where this could be helpful in either broad or nuanced circumstances. But I don't really want to drag this video out too long, and I'd like to feel that the general premise, as I've explained it so far, is fairly straightforward to understand. Though, you know, it can of course grow quite complex if we begin applying it to any number of personal habits or thought patterns. In any case, if you'd like to consider this sort of thing in greater detail, like I said before, the link to my book is posted below. And I've also provided a link to a significantly modified written version of this video. So, you know, if you'd like to learn by reading, or perhaps want to think about the application of these things with more time for your personal creativity to consider how they might apply to your own life and nature, feel free to follow that link. Or, you know, if you know someone who might be quite biased against me because of my frizzy hair and scraggly beard, but they might benefit from this sort of thing, then, from thinking about this sort of thing, then go ahead and just send them that text link, and we'll just, you know, try to never let them know what I look like, because, you know, we don't want them to be terribly subjected to those immature biases, because I have no intention to unfrizzle my hair or unscraggle my beard anytime too soon. So, anyways, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up on that note. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to invade the comment section, and I will gladly toss apples at you as gently as I can. And hopefully you will catch them and they won't hit you or knock you over. But if they do hit you or fall off on the ground, I hope that you can forgive me since I'm trying to throw them as compassionately as I can. But I can't entirely predict what's going to happen once they leave my hands.